It's strange how these family dynamics can be so suffocating, making you question everything. If you've ever felt trapped by family drama, hit that subscribe button. You're not alone. My breath hitched, a familiar knot tightening in my stomach as I watched Stephanie glide across my living room. Her smile, usually a weapon, was particularly saccharine tonight, a clear sign she was about to unleash one of her signature verbal assaults. It was my 30th birthday dinner, a small, intimate gathering with Michael, my husband, his mother Carol, and Stephanie, his older sister. I'd spent all day preparing, hoping for a rare evening of peace, but Stephanie had other plans. "Oh, Emily," she cooed, her eyes raking over my new dress. "That's a choice. So brave of you to wear something so vibrant. Most people wouldn't dare." Her tone implied I was either colorblind or utterly devoid of taste, a fashion faux pas of epic proportions. Michael, bless his heart, squeezed my hand under the table, a silent plea for me to tiptoe. Carol, ever the enabler, just chuckled softly, her eyes twinkling with what she believed was maternal pride. "Stephanie always speaks her mind, dear. It's her charm." Charm? It felt more like a meticulously aimed dart, designed to pierce my self-confidence, to chip away at my resolve. This wasn't a new phenomenon. For the 3 years I'd been married to Michael, Stephanie had been a constant, insidious presence, a shadow stretching over every family occasion, every quiet moment of happiness. Her criticisms weren't outright shouts or angry outbursts. They were subtle, delivered with a disarming smile and a faint concern that made them all the more potent, more difficult to counter. She called it brutal honesty, a trait she wore like a badge of honor, a shield against any form of accountability. To me, it was just cruelty, plain and simple, a deliberate act of emotional sabotage. The wedding was where it all began. I was a bundle of nerves and excitement, standing in my dream dress, moments away from marrying the love of my life. The air was thick with anticipation, the scent of lilies and fresh linen filling the bridal suite. Stephanie approached me, her eyes doing a slow, critical scan from my carefully styled updo to the tips of my ivory heels. "Congratulations, Emily," she chirped, her voice dripping with false chi. Her voice dripping with false chi. Her voice dripping with false chi. "You've really worked your magic on Michael. It's amazing how he didn't even notice your unconventional style. And those shoes, a bold choice for a wedding." I was too stunned to respond, my joy momentarily eclipsed by her casual cruelty. My friends, bridesmaids in their own right, stood by, their jaws practically on the floor. Sarah, my maid of honor, later confessed she almost stepped in, but I'd shaken my head, trying to preserve the fragile The memory still stung, a bitter taste in the otherwise sweet recollection of our wedding. It was the first crack in the perfect facade of family harmony I had envisioned, a foreboding whisper of what was to come. Our housewarming, 6 months later, was no different. She'd walked through our new apartment, a place Michael and I had poured our hearts and savings into, every piece of furniture, every framed photograph chosen with care and love. She delivered a running commentary of everything she deemed wrong, her voice a low, critical hum. "These curtains are so ethnic. Did you get them from a flea market?" she'd asked, wrinkling her nose at the hand-embroidered throws I'd painstakingly selected from a local artisan, pieces that held sentimental value. The roast I'd spent hours perfecting, following my grandmother's recipe, a dish Michael adored, was a bit dry, and my decision to serve a particular Pinot Noir was, of course, a rookie mistake. She then turned her attention to my appearance. Turned her attention to my appearance. "Emily, dear, you look exhausted. You should really take better care of yourself. It's not fair to Michael to let yourself go like this." All this while she piled her plate high with the dry roast and rookie mistake wine, devouring it with gusto, seemingly oblivious to the irony. Michael, as always, tried to smooth things over to deflect her barbs with humor, but his efforts felt weak, almost apologetic, leaving me feeling exposed. It fueled my resentment, not just towards Stephanie, but towards him for his inability to defend me. I remember retreating to the kitchen, tears stained my eyes, wondering if this was what my life would be like now. A constant performance under Stephanie's critical, unforgiving gaze. I tried to tell myself it was just me. I was the outsider, the new addition to the family, and Stephanie was just being protective of her brother. Maybe she felt threatened by my presence, or perhaps she was just naturally abrasive, a personality quirk I needed to accept. I'd spent countless nights dissecting her words, searching for a hidden meaning, a way to understand her, to rationalize her behavior. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought about it, she was like this with everyone. At a family barbecue last summer, she told Michael he was getting a little softer on the middle, and that his new haircut made him look like a suburban dad trying too hard. She'd even critique her own mother, Carol, for her outdated fashion choices and predictable taste in literature, always with that same condescending smirk, that air of intellectual superiority. It was a revelation, a moment of clarity that was both a relief and a source of deeper anger. It wasn't just me. Stephanie was an equal opportunity critic, a black hole of negativity that spared no one. This realization, while validating, also made her behavior seem even more pathetic. What kind of person derived joy from tearing others down? It was a hollow victory, though, as knowing she was universally disliked didn't make her barbs any less painful, or her presence any less draining. It's strange how these dark family secrets connect us. If you're feeling this shock too, it helps uncover more hidden family truths. The final straw came at a work dinner for Michael's company. It was a formal event, a chance for me to finally meet the colleagues he spent so much of his life with, the people who shaped his professional world. I was nervous, but also excited to make a good impression, to show them the confident, capable woman Michael had married. Stephanie, who had no reason to be there, had somehow managed to tag along with Carol, claiming she was supporting her brother, though her presence felt more like a hostile takeover. I was in the middle of a pleasant conversation with Michael's boss, Mr. Harrison, a kind, unassuming man with a gentle demeanor, when Stephanie sauntered over, a glass of champagne in her hand. Her eyes, though, were a little unfocused from the alcohol, and her usual veneer of polite disdain was starting to crack, revealing the raw aggression beneath. "Emily, darling," she'd slurred, her voice loud enough for everyone at our table, and possibly the next, to hear. "It's so sweet that you're trying to understand Michael's work. It must be so difficult for you, with your, background." She gestured vaguely at my dress, then at my face, as if my entire existence was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve, a flawed specimen under a microscopic scrutiny. My background was a perfectly respectable job in marketing, a field I excelled in, where my creativity and strategic thinking were valued, but Stephanie's tone made it sound like I just crawled out of a ditch, uneducated and unrefined. The table went silent, fawn silent, faw went silent, fawns. I felt a hot flush of shame and anger creep up my neck, a familiar burning sensation. Mr. Harrison, bless his heart, tried to interject, to steer the conversation back to safer ground, but Stephanie wasn't finished. "I mean, it's not exactly rocket science, is it? Not like, say, a PhD in astrophysics. But hey, someone's gotta do the grunt work, right?" She punctuated her statement with a loud, obnoxious laugh that echoed through the otherwise elegant dining room, a jarring, vulgar sound. Michael, from across the table, shot me a look of pure panic, a silent plea for me to just smile and nod, to let it go, to be the bigger person, to once again absorb the blow for the sake of peace. But in that moment, something inside me snapped. I was done being the bigger person. I was done letting her. I was done letting her holler. I was done letting her. I was done letting her. I was done letting her and some letting her. The years of quiet resentment, the swallowed insults, the forced smiles, they all coalesced into a burning resolve. I would not be her punching bag anymore. The humiliation was too public, too personal. It was time for a change, a reckoning. I decided to fight fire with fire. I would use her own weapon against her, brutal honesty. I started small, a subtle jab here, a pointed observation there, always delivered with a sweet, innocent smile, a veneer of politeness that mirrored her own. At the next family gathering, a casual Sunday brunch at Carol's house, Stephanie launched into a tirade about the rising cost of organic produce. "It's just ridiculous," she huffed, gesturing dramatically with a half-eaten croissant, her mouth full. "These farmers are practically robbing us blind." And for what? So people can pretend they're healthier? It's all a scam, I tell you. I waited for a beat, letting her words hang in the air, then chimed in, my voice light and airy, almost conversational. "You're right, Stephanie. It is ridiculous. Especially when you're on a fixed income or, well, place. Especially when you're on a fixed income or, every penny counts then, doesn't it? It must be so challenging to manage a budget without a steady income, to constantly worry about such trivial expenses." The table went silent. Stephanie's fork clattered against her plate, her eyes widening in disbelief, her mouth agape. She shot me a look that could curdle milk, a venomous glare, but I just smiled back, wide-eyed and innocent, as if I had merely made an observation. The look of shock-og. She was so used to dishing it out, she had no idea how to take it. It was a small victory, but it tasted sweet, a tiny crack in her impenetrable armor. Michael gave me a warning glance, a slight shake of his head, but even he seemed a little surprised, and perhaps a little relieved, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. This moment shattered everything I knew. If you were feeling this shock too, hit like. It helps uncover more hidden family truths. The real turning point, however, came during a heated discussion about careers and financial independence. We were at a family reunion, a sprawling affair at a rented lake house in upstate New York, surrounded by distant relatives who mostly ignored Stephanie's antics, accustomed to her dramatic outburst, treating them as background noise. Stephanie was on her usual soapbox, lamenting the lack of intellectual stimulation in the modern workplace and bragging about her 5 degrees, a phrase that had become a running joke in my head, a hollow boast she clung to like a life raft in a stormy sea of insecurity. She then turned her attention to me, her voice dripping with condescension, her eyes scanning my simple, comfortable attire as if judging my entire worth based on Worth betyder my entire worth based on It's a shame, really, she'd said, that you're not more ambitious, Emily. You could have been so much more. You're so complacent, content with mediocrity. I mean, a marketing manager? It's hardly groundbreaking, is it? Not exactly changing the world. I took a deep breath, the cool lake breeze doing little to cool the fire building within me, a slow burn that had been simmering for years. I smiled, a genuine, albeit slightly dangerous, smile. My voice was calm and even, every word carefully chosen, each syllable a calculated strike, delivered with precision. You know, Stephanie, I said, loud enough for a few curious relatives to overhear, their conversations dying down as they sensed the shift in the air, the impending confrontation. I've always admired your dedication to education. It's truly impressive. But I have to ask, with all those degrees, when are you planning on actually using them? I mean, it must be so difficult for Carol, having to support a woman in her late 30s who, despite her vast intellect, hasn't managed to hold down a job for more than a few months at a time. I can't even imagine the financial strain or the emotional toll that must take on a mother. It's truly a burden, wouldn't you say? Especially when you consider the cost of those advanced degrees and the return on investment. It's a lot. Oh, it's a lot. 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 Where is the real world impact? I watched her face, fascinated, as the color drained from it, leaving it a ghostly white, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the distant lapping of the lake water against the shore and the frantic chirping of cicadas. Stephanie's face, which had been a mask of smug superiority, crumbled. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, struggling to form a coherent response. Her carefully constructed world of intellectual dominance collapsing around her like a house of cards. Her eyes, usually so full of venom, welled up with tears, and she fled the room without another word, a blur of motion, leaving a trail of stunned relatives in her wake. Carol, who had been trying to pretend she wasn't listening, her face fixed in a strained smile, her hands clutching her purse, her knuckles white, finally looked at me with something other than amusement. It was a look of pure, unadulterated fury, mixed with a hint of hint. Michael, who had been trying to mediate, his face a mixture of shock and confusion and a dawning understanding, just stared at me, his mouth agape. I had finally done it. I had broken the unspoken rule. I had made Stephanie cry, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt liberated. A weight I hadn't realized I was carrying for years had finally been lifted, replaced by a surge of defiant energy. Over the next few weeks, a strange, uneasy calm descended upon the family gatherings. Stephanie was noticeably absent, her usual boisterous presence replaced by an almost palpable void, a silence that was both welcome and unsettling. Carol was unusually subdued, her usual effervescent chatter replaced by clipped, polite responses, her eyes darting nervously whenever Stephanie's name was mentioned. Michael, while still a little shell-shocked by my directness, seemed to be processing something profound. He'd started asking me more questions about my work, about my opinions, genuinely listening, not just nodding along, but engaging with real interest. It was a small shift, but a significant one. I realized that my silence had not only enabled Stephanie, but it had also, in a way, diminished my own voice within the family. By finally speaking up, I wasn't just fighting Stephanie. I was reclaiming my own space, my own identity, and forcing Michael to confront the uncomfortable truth he'd been avoiding. But the peace was fragile, a thin veneer over years of ingrained dysfunction. I knew this wasn't over. Stephanie, like a wounded animal, would eventually lash out, perhaps even more viciously than before, seeking to reclaim her lost territory. And I was ready. I had tasted the sweet victory of standing up for myself, of speaking my truth, and I wasn't going back to being the silent, accommodating wife. The next confrontation I knew it would be the true test of whether I could truly change the dynamic, or if I was destined to forever be the target of the uninvited critic. The air in the upscale Italian restaurant, Bella Luna, was thick with unspoken tension. It was Carol's 60th birthday, a milestone celebration, and the family had gathered at her favorite place, known for its exquisite pasta and even more exquisite prices. The soft lighting and the murmur of other diners did little to alleviate the palpable anxiety that hummed beneath the surface. Stephanie, who had been avoiding me since our last encounter at the lake house, was unusually quiet, picking at her lobster ravioli and shooting me venomous glances from across the table. Her silence was more unsettling than her usual barbs, a coiled spring waiting to release its tension, a predator biding its time. I knew it was only a matter of time before she erupted. Michael, sensing the impending storm, kept trying to steer the conversation to safe, neutral topics, asking about work projects or current events, desperately attempting to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but his efforts were futile. Carol, oblivious or perhaps willfully ignorant, was beaming, enjoying the attention, basking in the glow of her special day, seemingly unaware of the brewing storm. As we were finishing our main course and the waiter was clearing plates, Stephanie cleared her throat, a sly, familiar smile playing on her lips. Her eyes, though, held a dangerous glint, a predatory gleam that sent a shiver down my spine. "You know, Emily," she began, her voice dripping with mock sweetness, loud enough to draw the attention of a few nearby diners, who suddenly shifted in their seats, sensing drama, their forks pausing midair. Their forks pausing midair. Her forks pausing midair. Their forks pausing midair. Can hear? It's so simple. I'm sure it was very affordable. Not everyone can afford designer, of course, but one does try to make an effort for a milestone birthday, wouldn't you agree? She gestured vaguely at my elegant, but not ostentatious, navy blue dress, a gift from Michael that I loved, a classic piece that would never go out of style, a dress that made me feel confident and comfortable. I met her gaze, my heart pounding in my chest, a drumbeat against my ribs, but my expression remained calm, a serene mask of composure. This was it. The final showdown. It is simple, isn't it? I replied, my voice calm and steady, a stark contrast to the tremor in my hands hidden beneath the table, clasped tightly in my lap, a silent battle being waged within me. I find that as I get older, Stephanie, I appreciate simple impulses of not needing to constantly prove yourself to others with flashy labels or extravagant displays. True elegance, in my opinion, comes from confidence, not cost. And frankly, I find comfort in knowing my clothes aren't screaming for attention, unlike some. I took a slow sip of water, allowing my words to hang in the air, letting them sink in, watching her reaction, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. Stephanie's smile faltered for a moment, her eyes narrowing, a flicker of genuine anger crossing her face, but she quickly recovered, her voice gaining an edge, a sharp, cutting tone. "Well, I suppose when you have a simple job, you have simple taste," she retorted, her voice rising, attracting more attention from the surrounding tables, a few heads turning discreetly. Some of us, however, have more complex interests. Like my five fives. They've given me a certain perspective on the world, a perspective that you, with your marketing background, could never understand. It's about intellectual rigor, Emily, something you wouldn't find in a quarterly sales report. It's about shaping minds, not just selling products, a pursuit far more noble than chasing market trends. She leaned back, a triumphant smirk on her face, clearly expecting me to wilt under her intellectual superiority, to retreat into my shell as I had so many times before, to cower before her supposed brilliance. I put down my fork, carefully, deliberately, the small clink of ceramic against linen sounding unnaturally loud in the sudden quiet. I looked her straight in the eye. The restaurant seemed to fade into the background, all attention focused on our silent battle, the air crackling with anticipation, a palpable tension. "You're right, Stephanie," I said, my voice ringing with a newfound confidence, a steel I hadn't known I possessed, a strength born of years of quiet suffering and simmering resentment. "I don't have 5 degrees. I have 1. A bachelor's in business administration, which I earned while working 2 jobs to pay my way through college, without a single cent of family support, without relying on anyone. And I have a career that I'm proud of, a career that allows me to be a self-sufficient adult, to contribute to my household, and to build a future with my husband. I don't have to rely on my mother to pay my bills or to bail me out of debt. I don't have to pretend to be something I'm not. And you know what? I wouldn't trade that for all theoretical knowledge in the world. Because real-world experience, real independence, that's worth more than any piece of paper, especially if those pieces of paper aren't actually leading to anything tangible, anything productive. My gaze held hers, unwavering, challenging her to respond, to find a flaw in my logic, to counter my undeniable truth. This moment shattered everything I knew. If you're feeling this shock too, it helps uncover more hidden family truths. The table fell silent, the chatter of the restaurant suddenly distant, replaced by a collective intake of breath, a gasp from a nearby table. Stephanie's face was a mask of disbelief, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, struggling to form a coherent response. Her carefully constructed world of intellectual dominance collapsing around her like a house of cards. Her eyes, usually so full of venom, welled up with tears, and she fled the room without another word, a blur of motion, knocking over her chair in her haste, leaving a trail of stunned relatives in her wake. Carol, who had been trying to pretend she wasn't listening, her face fixed in a strained smile, her hands clutching her purse, her knuckles white, finally looked at me with something other than amusement. It was a look of pure, unadulterated fury, mixed with a hint of fear, a primal instinct to protect her cub, even a flawed one. Michael, who had been trying to mediate, his face a mixture of shock and confusion, and a dawning understanding, just stared at me, his mouth agape, his own world tilting on its axis. I had finally done it. I had broken the unspoken rule. I had made Stephanie cry. And for the first time, I did. And for the first time, I did. And for the first time, I did. A weight I hadn't realized I was carrying for years had finally been lifted, replaced by a surge of defiant energy, a sense of profound vindication. Just then, as Stephanie burst into tears and stumbled away from the table, knocking over her chair in her haste, fleeing the restaurant in a dramatic exit that drew every eye in the room, I overheard a hushed, frantic conversation. Carol, her face pale with fury and embarrassment, had turned to a distant aunt, Aunt Susan, who had joined us for the celebration. Aunt Susan, a kind, gossipy woman, had her hand on Carol's arm, her hand on Carol's arm. Thanks. I don't know what to do anymore, Susan, Carol whispered, her voice thick with despair, laced with a desperation I'd never heard before, a raw, exposed vulnerability that was startling to witness. All those online courses, the certifications, she never finishes any of them. They're mostly just introductory modules she signs up for and then abandons after a few weeks. The debt is piling up, Susan. Credit cards, student loans. I've been quietly paying them off for years, trying to keep it a secret from Michael, from everyone. I just wanted her to have something to be proud of, something to make her feel special, to give her an edge in this competitive world. I thought if she had enough degrees, she'd finally find her footing, find her place. The words hit me like a physical blow, far more impactful than any of Stephanie's insults. It was all a lie. The 5 degrees, the intellectual superiority, the condescending attitude, it was all a facade, a carefully constructed illusion to hide a lifetime of failure and insecurity. In that moment, my anger towards Stephanie dissipated, replaced by a profound, aching sense of pity. She wasn't a monster. She was just a scared, broken woman, trapped in a web of her own making, propped up by her mother's desperate lies for far too long. The cruelty was a defense mechanism, a way to deflect from her own deep-seated shame, a desperate attempt to feel superior when she felt so utterly inadequate. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it explained it. And that explanation, that sudden, stark clarity, was a revelation that shook me to third degree. The entire family dynamic, the years of tension and resentment, suddenly made a twisted kind of sense. Carol wasn't just enabling Stephanie. She was actively participating in the deception, sacrificing her own financial stability and peace of mind to maintain a crumbling illusion, all for the sake of her fragile daughter's ego and her own desperate need for her children to appear successful. Michael, who had been sitting in stunned silence, his face a mixture of shock, confusion, and dawning horror, finally found his voice. "Emily, what was that?" he asked, his tone a mix of anger and bewilderment. his eyes searching mine for answers, for confirmation of what he had just heard. You just made my sister cry at my mom's birthday dinner. And what was Mom saying about debt? What's going on? His voice was barely overly on. His voice was barely reclined. His voice was barely revealed from barely. She's almost 40, Michael, I said, my voice still firm, though my hands were shaking, the adrenaline finally starting to recede, leaving me feeling strangely hollow. And she's been making me cry and making you feel small and making your mother walk on eggshells for years. Someone had to say something. Someone had to break the cycle. And now we know why. I looked at him, my eyes pleading for understanding, for him to see the truth that had just ending, for him to see the truth that had just ending. She see the truth that had just deceiving over. And to see the truth that had just been making. She's not the genius we all thought she was, Michael. She's in deep trouble and Carol has been covering it up. All those degrees, they're mostly unfinished online courses. And the debt? It's significant. Your mom has been secretly paying for it all, sacrificing her own retirement, her own peace of mind. The drive home was silent, heavy, with unspoken accusations and raw emotions. The city lights blurred past us, reflecting our own internal turmoil. Carol called Michael later that night, her voice cold and distant, filled with the wounded pride I hadn't heard before, a desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative, to rewrite the events of the evening. She accused me of being cruel, of intentionally humiliating Stephanie, of ruining her poo. Thinks Stephanie. Of ruining her poo. She denied everything I'd overheard, but her voice lacked conviction, a hollow ring that betrayed her, a desperate plea for him to believe her lies. Michael, caught in the middle, tried to defend me, but his heart wasn't fully in it. He was still reeling from the shock, from the shattered illusion of his brilliant, successful sister, and the profound betrayal of his mother's secrecy. The foundations of his family, as he understood them, had been shaken to their core, leaving him adrift and disoriented. Over the next few days, the family was fractured. Carol barely spoke to me, her interactions stiff and formal, and Stephanie refused to answer anyone's calls or text, retreating into her self-imposed exile, nursing her wounded ego. Michael was initially angry, confused, and deeply hurt. He spent hours pacing our apartment, lost in thought, replaying years of interactions with his sister and mother, seeing them through a new, painful, considering them. He remembered all the times Stephanie had subtly undermined him, all the times he'd felt inadequate compared to her supposed achievements, how he'd constantly sought her approval. He remembered the arguments we'd had, the times he told me to just let it go, to be the bigger person, effectively silencing me. He started to see the pattern, the insidious way Stephanie's negativity had poisoned their family for years, and how his mother's enabling had not only created a monster, but had also crippled her own son's ability to stand up for himself, to recognize toxic behavior. One evening, about a week after the disastrous birthday dinner, he sat me down, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret, understanding, and a new kind of determination, a quiet strength I hadn't seen in him before, a resolve that filled me with hope. "I'm sorry, Emily," he said, taking my hand, his grip firm, reassuring, a silent promise. "I should have stood up for you. I should have stood up for myself. I was so used to her. And I was so blind to what Mom was doing, to what she was hiding, to the damage it was causing us all." His voice was heavy with self-reproach. "It's not normal, Michael," I replied, squeezing his hand, offering comfort and support, letting him know he wasn't alone. "And it's not fair to you, or to your mom, or to me. We deserve to be treated with respect. And Stephanie, She deserves help, not continued enablement. She needs to get along. She needs to. Michael nodded, a heavy sigh escaping his lips, as if releasing years of pent-up frustration and unspoken burdens. You were right to say something, even if it was messy. It needed to be said. All of it. The truth, no matter how painful, had to come out. He then did something I never thought he'd do. He called Carol and had a long, difficult conversation with her, not as a son seeking comfort, but as an adult demanding honesty, setting boundaries, and expressing his profound disappointment. He told her that enabling Stephanie wasn't helping her, that it was actually hurting her and everyone else. He urged her to stop covering for Stephanie, to let her face the consequences of her choices, to seek professional help for her own codependency and the deep-seated need to maintain a perfect image. And then he called Stephanie. That conversation was even harder. I could hear snippets from the other room, Michael's voice, firm but gentle, Stephanie's tearful protest, then a long, agonizing silence. When he came back, his face was drawn, but there was a new resolve in his eyes, a quiet triumph, a sense of having done the right thing, however difficult. She's agreed to see a therapist, he said, almost disbelievingly, as if he couldn't quite believe his own word firm, as if he couldn't quite believe his own word apology. As if he couldn't quite believe his own word the bolts. Mom said she'd think about it, about setting some boundaries. It's not going to be easy, Emily. It's going to be a long road, but it's a start, a real start, for all of us. The family dynamic was permanently altered. It wasn't an overnight fix, and there were still awkward silences and strained conversations, especially with Carol, who found it hard to relinquish her role as Stephanie's protector. But a seed had been planted, a fragile hope for change, a possibility of healing. Stephanie, slowly, reluctantly began therapy, forced to confront the reality she had so long avoided, the insecurities she had masked with cruelty. Carol, hesitant at first, started to push back on Stephanie's demands, encouraging her to find her own path, to seek employment, to become independent, to finally grow up and take responsibility for her life. It was a painful process, filled with setbacks and emotional outbursts, but it was progress, slow and incremental, but undeniable. The illusion of perfection had been shattered, but in its place, a fragile hope for genuine connection began to emerge. A hope for a family built on honesty rather than pretense, on mutual respect rather than veiled contempt. Emily and Michael's relationship, forged in the fires of this family drama, was stronger than ever. We had faced a difficult truth, and we had come out on the other side united. We learned to communicate more openly, to trust each other's judgment, and to stand as a united front against external pressures. The ordeal had tested us, but it had also solidified our bond, proving that our love was strong enough to weather any storm or there. I still lie awake wondering, what would you have done when they tried to control your narrative? Share your truth in the comments. Subscribe for more shocking family revelations. The path to a healthier family was long, but for the first time, I felt like we were walking it together, hand in hand, facing the future with a shared understanding and renewed commitment. The uninvited critic was still there, a shadow that occasionally loomed, a reminder of the past, but her power had been diminished, her venom defanged. And I, Emily, was no longer silent. I had found my voice, and in doing so, I'd helped my husband find his, and perhaps even helped his family find a path towards genuine healing. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And sometimes real is better than perfect. The journey was far from over, but we had taken the first, most difficult steps towards a future built on honesty, respect, and true love, rather than on facades and unspoken resentments. And that, I realized, was a victory worth fighting for, a testament to the power of truth, no matter how uncomfortable, how disruptive. It was the beginning of our real story, messy and imperfect, but undeniably ours, and infinitely more valuable than any illusion of perfection.